Allegiant Stadium sounded different tonight than it does for a normal preseason opener, and I think everyone inside that building felt it the second Kirk Cousins jogged out of the tunnel. This wasn't just another exhibition game to check off before the real schedule starts. This was the first live snapshot of a rebuild that's been years in the making, and I want to walk you through everything I saw because there's a lot more happening under the surface than one preseason score is ever going to tell you. First, the framing you need before any of this makes sense. Two brand new head coaches were coaching real football tonight, not clipboard cameos. Clint Kubiak got his first genuine look at a roster he spent an entire offseason tearing down and rebuilding, and across the field, Matt LaFleur was doing the same thing with Arizona, and neither man treated this like a night for early exits and safe distance from real snaps. Both coaches said it themselves beforehand. This was live football. Jacoby Brissett ran that Cardinals offense with actual intent to score. Rookie back Jeremiah Love made his pro debut, and that meant this Raiders defense was about to face something no scout team period in the desert heat can ever simulate: a starting quarterback who's genuinely trying to move the ball on you. That's the piece I keep circling back to. You can dominate 6 weeks of camp against your own backups and still have no idea what you actually have until real bodies in different colored jerseys are lined up across from you with real intent. That's exactly the test Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker walked into tonight, and how that retooled linebacker room handled its first live look tells you more than any padded rep from August ever could. Think about what this front office actually committed to this offseason. They didn't tinker at the margins of a defense that clearly underperformed a year ago. They went out and acquired 2 players who were part of a front 7 good enough to win a Super Bowl not long ago. That's not a small patch. That's a declaration. It tells you the people running this organization believe last season's failures were about chemistry and communication, not raw ability. So tonight was never really about whether Dean or Walker logs a tackle in the box score. It was about whether a defense full of new faces can diagnose motion pre-snap and play at full speed instead of thinking their way through assignments. You won't find that distinction in a stat line, but if you know what you're watching for, it's obvious in real time. And there's a coaching wrinkle worth flagging here too. Kubiak didn't just inherit this defense, he's the one who went and got these 2 linebackers specifically to fit a system he already trusts. That means there's nowhere to hide if the fit looks wrong early. If Dean and Walker are still visibly hesitating in September, that's not just a personnel story anymore. That becomes a scheme story, and those are the ones that follow a first-year head coach around all winter. Now let's get to the name everybody actually tuned in for. Fernando Mendoza was active tonight, though not starting. Cousins opened the game exactly as expected, but Kubiak had already made it clear that once Cousins came off the field, Mendoza was going to play extensively. This is the night this entire fan base has been circling on the calendar since the franchise bottomed out specifically to land the top pick. And I'll say this plainly, I don't believe a rookie wins a starting job in August, and I don't think that's remotely the point of tonight. The point is, watching how he processes speed he has genuinely never seen before in his life. Here's what I was actually studying the second he checked into the game, and none of it involves his final stat line. Throw the box score out completely. I wanted to see his internal clock. Plenty of college quarterbacks who look untouchable against zone coverage freeze up the very first time an NFL edge rusher collapses the pocket half a second faster than anything they ever saw on a Saturday afternoon. I wanted to see whether he reset his feet under real pressure instead of bailing the pocket early, because that hesitation, hunting for a third read when the first one was sitting right there, is exactly what gets young quarterbacks put on the turf in this league. And I wanted the fun part too. The improvisation. The kind of throw no veteran coordinator would ever draw up on a whiteboard that somehow still works because the arm talent bails him out. If he found his way into that end zone even once tonight, in his very first appearance in that building, that's a moment this fan base holds on to regardless of what the final scoreboard said. There's a quieter storyline sitting underneath all of that, and it matters just as much. Every rep Mendoza takes adds weight to a timeline this fan base has already made clear they don't want stretched across 2 or 3 patient rebuilding seasons. They want progress now, not eventually. Kubiak has to manage that noise carefully, because rushing a rookie before he's genuinely ready has ended more promising careers in this league than patience ever has. Before we even get to the rookie, though, I wanted to see what Cousins looked like running this offense for real. This is a quarterback coming off a rough stretch, bouncing through mismatched systems, now reunited with the coordinator who got the best football of his career out of him back in Minnesota. And there's a chip on his shoulder walking into tonight that goes beyond a simple quarterback competition, because Cousins already tangled with Max Crosby during a heated camp practice, and instead of letting that moment linger, he seems to have converted it into fuel. He was likely getting one drive, maybe two, before Mendoza took over, so this was never about a full performance from him. It was about whether he could move this offense with real authority in a limited sample and remind everyone exactly why this front office brought him in to begin with. That Crosby incident deserves a moment of its own, because it tells you something real about the temperature inside this building right now. When your best defensive player and your starting quarterback tangle up during a live rep, that's not automatically a red flag. Sometimes two competitive players clashing is exactly what establishes standards inside a locker room still figuring out its identity under a brand new staff. But it can also turn into a warning sign if it isn't handled correctly behind closed doors. From everything that's come out of camp, Kubiak treated it as competitive fire rather than dysfunction, and Cousins responded the way you want a professional to respond, pouring that energy into practice instead of carrying a grudge into the tunnel. Tonight was the first real chance to see whether that translates into actual chemistry, particularly with Brock Bowers, who is unquestionably the top target the moment this passing game gets live again. I'll admit I was watching Cousins' body language just as closely as his throws tonight. A veteran who's been through a tense moment like that in front of his own locker room usually shows you something in how he carries himself the next time real cameras are pointed at him. Does he look loose? Does he look like a guy trying to prove a point? Either answer tells you something about how this quarterback room is actually functioning behind the scenes, well beyond whatever the official depth chart says. Speaking of Crosby, his availability tonight was genuinely up in the air, and honestly, if it were my call, I wouldn't have rushed him onto that field at all. He's the anchor of this entire defense, and preseason snaps simply aren't worth risking anything with a player this important to the plan. But anyone who's followed his career knows that if there was any version of tonight where he could play, he was going to fight for it. That competitive streak is exactly what made him the face of this defense in the first place, and it's also exactly the instinct a coaching staff sometimes has to protect a guy from himself over. Watch how Kubiak's staff handles Crosby moving forward, because it tells you a lot about how much trust already exists between a new regime and its best player. If he's held out and accepts that decision without pushing back publicly, that's a genuinely good early sign for where this relationship stands. On the ground, my eyes were locked on the room behind Ashton Ginty. Mike Washington has been turning heads all camp with a physical, downhill running style that fits exactly what this new staff wants to install, and he's been vocal about wanting to put the league on notice the moment the pads came on for real. Tonight was his chance to back that talk up on tape. Behind him, Raheem Blackshear and Dylan Laub are fighting over whatever's left of that third running back job, and in an offense that's clearly going to lean on the ground game under Kubiak. That competition genuinely matters for who's still on this roster come September. I'd caution everyone against overreacting to whatever Ginty did or didn't do tonight, assuming he played much at all. Starbacks almost never get real workloads in preseason openers, and we already lived through one overreaction cycle a year ago, built entirely around a single meaningless drive. The real roster battle in that room lives with the backups, and that's exactly where I kept my attention. The receiver room is where things get genuinely unresolved. Trey Tucker and Jacoby Myers have that top two locked down, but the third job is still wide open, and Jack Beck has been holding it for now. Malik Benson is the name everyone in camp keeps bringing up, largely because of the rapport he's already built with Mendoza specifically, and tonight was his opportunity to show that chemistry translates when it actually counts on air. Meanwhile, Dante Thornton is sitting in a spot he cannot afford to be in. He was the buzz story of camp a year ago, and then real football started and the production simply disappeared. If he wants to keep his roster spot, This preseason, starting tonight, is where he proves last year's hype wasn't a mirage. I've watched this exact pattern play out across the league more times than I can count. A receiver dominates spring practice, racks up glowing quotes from beat writers, and then the pads go on and the separation disappears because none of it was ever built against real press coverage from a corner trying to end his career on national television. That's the trap Thornton has to avoid falling into again. And it's precisely the door Benson has cracked open if he wants to leapfrog a guy with a full extra year in this building. Up front, the starting offensive line stayed completely intact throughout camp. Colton Miller, Alex Kappa, Jackson Powers-Johnson, Dylan Parham, and DJ Glaze rounded out that group, and I wanted to see how they held up against actual defenders trying to hurt them, not the same scout team bodies they've faced every single day for 6 straight weeks. This entire offense goes exactly as far as that line lets it go, full stop. It doesn't matter how live Mendoza's arm looks or how explosive Ginty is in space if the front 5 can't buy 3 seconds. It's the least glamorous storyline of the night, and it might end up being the one that matters most once real football starts. It's also worth remembering that continuity up front is its own kind of quiet luxury in this league. Plenty of teams are still auditioning combinations in mid-August, guessing at chemistry that hasn't had time to form. This group has already logged the reps together. That doesn't guarantee anything once the pads come off the shelf for real, but it does mean whatever struggles show up tonight can't be blamed on unfamiliarity. There's nowhere to hide behind a shuffled lineup here, and that's exactly the kind of standard a rebuilding roster needs somewhere on the field. On the other side of the ball, beyond the star names, I'm watching the young guys actually fighting for real roles on this roster. Tonka Hemingway has reportedly been earning first-team reps and real praise throughout camp, and tonight told us whether that praise shows up as disruption against a live offensive line instead of just glowing quotes in a press availability. Undrafted and late-round defenders make careers on nights exactly like this one, because a staff evaluating 53 roster spots with fresh eyes needs production on tape, not reputation from OTAs. In the secondary, this was a proving ground for corners like Zach Massey and Jacorian Bennett, guys who need to show they can actually lock down NFL receivers, rather than just look clean in shorts during a walkthrough. If either of them got tested by Arizona's passing attack and came away with a pass breakup, that's the kind of tape evaluators circle long after this specific score gets forgotten. There's a smaller storyline worth mentioning before I widen the lens. The Raiders added offensive lineman Braden Daniels off the street this week, a depth piece who spent most of last season on Miami's practice squad, and it came with a corresponding move as the team parted ways with another lineman dealing with an injury designation. That's not a headline transaction by any stretch, but it's exactly the kind of low-cost flexibility a front office needs once real injuries start piling up in August. Moves like that rarely get discussed outside hardcore roster circles, but the teams that build a real plan for the back of their depth chart are the ones that don't panic in October when a starter goes down unexpectedly. Step back for a second and think about where this franchise actually sits right now. This isn't a team quietly rebuilding in the background hoping nobody notices. This is a team that traded up, tanked, and burned real draft capital specifically to put itself in position to select a quarterback the front office believes can lead this organization for the next decade. That kind of bet raises the stakes on every single evaluation happening around him. It raises the stakes on Kubiak's play calling. It raises the stakes on Cousins' leadership inside a quarterback room built around competition instead of comfort. And it raises the stakes on every position battle up and down this depth chart, because a team building its future around a rookie quarterback needs real playmakers around him capable of cashing in the moments he creates. There's a bigger, league-wide context worth sitting with here too. Every August, national media spends weeks arguing over which rookie quarterbacks look ready and which ones need a redshirt year. Mendoza is going to be part of that conversation, whether this coaching staff wants him to be or not, purely because of where he was drafted and the hype that's trailed him since college. That means every throw he made tonight gets dissected online within minutes by people who never watched a single practice rep and have no real idea what he's actually being asked to do schematically. My advice heading into a night like this is simple. Watch the process, not just the results. A rookie playing behind a veteran in his first professional appearance isn't trying to win a job tonight. He's laying a foundation. Judge it through that lens, and you'll walk away with a far clearer picture of where this is actually headed than anyone screaming about a single incompletion online. By the time the backups were cleaning things up in the fourth quarter, we should have real answers on 4 or 5 of these threads. Did Cousins look sharp enough in a limited sample to hold off the pressure building behind him? Did Mendoza flash the poise that made him worth the top pick? Did this rebuilt defense hold its own against a Cardinals offense that wasn't holding anything back? And did that third receiver spot finally produce a clear answer after sitting unsettled since the first day of camp? However, those questions shook out. One thing was already true tonight. This franchise is being rebuilt in real time, in front of all of us, and everything we just watched was only the first chapter.